Okay. So, yeah, we can start.
Uh, well, hello everybody. I see that most people survive Christmas and survive the new year, and I'm glad to have you guys here again today. You guys out west, you have our hearts with you with the pretty brutal weather that you're having right now. Um, no offense to you guys, but you can kind of keep that right now. I think next week they got us getting, I don't know, I think they said below zero 1 or 2 days, but I said, hell, we're going to be in the middle of January for our first bad weather. I said, I'll take that every year. But anyway, enough of that. Um, Guys, we're going to go ahead and get started on this meeting. You guys got any questions? The main thing on this group is you guys got to ask some questions here. Um, you know, you don't learn anything. Um, you don't learn anything if you don't ask questions. There is not such a um, dumb, dumb question. Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
The link Joe sent isn't working. That's from Craig, and Brandon did not get an invite.
Brandon, who?
I don't.
Christensen. Christensen?
Oh, that could be.
All right, hold on. I'll dig it up and
Okay.
end it.
Anyway, we
Yeah.
need participation, guys. I mean, if there's something on your mind, don't be afraid to ask. Um, like I said, main thing is we're here to help, try to teach um, at every aspect we can. We don't know it all by any means. You just ask my wife. Um, not very smart, but we do try our best to try to answer you the honest questions that we can and the most logical ones. You gotta remember we do this for ROI while we're doing this. Um, so we do give an honest answer and probably not the right or not the same answer that you get from most of the other companies. So anyway, let's go ahead and get starting on this. So now, just the question number one, or saying number one, I am kind of concerned on this because I did some SAP testing like, oh, that had to be 6, 7 years ago, maybe. Might have been longer than that. I mean, just right when SAP testing first started, and the problem was I already had about 8, 9 years of tissue samples, and my SAP testing was reading nothing like my tissue samples. So, not saying that the SAP testing is wrong by any means. Um, if that's the only thing that you have or what you have the most of, by all means, keep going with that. But we ended up switching back and staying with the tissue samples just because if the SAP testing was not telling me or I was not understanding what I needed to understand to utilize the SAP testing. Um, I'm not saying that they're bad, that they don't work by any means. I'm just saying that I probably did not given enough time to learn a pattern um, on the SAP testing because there was, we would be going into a stress period and our tissue samples were dropping, and we really wasn't seeing that on the SAP test. Now, like I said, maybe they move in minor numbers. I don't know. It's just, guys, I'm sorry. I just can't help you. And maybe we can maybe there's some other guys on here that has dealt with SAP testing in the group. Do we have anybody in the first group, the older group, that does any sap testing? I don't know if there is or not.
I'm not
Terry,
seeing it.
Joe?
No, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, um, so don't
Well-
give up. If that is your only way, we will try to figure out a way or find somebody that can help you on the sap testing. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm just gonna tell you, I've only been around it one time, and that was, like I said, 6, 7 years ago. And I gave up because I probably wasn't smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
So
Kevin, you might note there, he says he's got these, but he's also moving to tissue sampling. So Jason, can you turn your mic on? And sort of, we like to ask you questions as we go through these things. So,
Sure.
yeah, there you go, Kevin. He's on now.
okay. So which I see them on the slide here. We'll get to your soil samples and some of your tissue samples, but I apologize about the sap testing. Have you done the sap testing very long?
I did it for 2 years, and this year I switched to tissue testing. My reason, I guess, I don't know how accurate the sap testing was, but it was just stupid expensive to get done all the time. So
Could you send yours in the United States, or did you have to send yours to Netherlands like we did?
yeah, I was working with John Kemp, and
Okay.
so it went to the Netherlands, and I've since quit working with John Kemp. I think they put out a lot of good information, but my experience was they're a very difficult company to work with.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that a little bit. I heard a good company, just kind of their way or the highway. I mean, that's just what I heard.
It is, and
Uh,
their products, I mean, they're extremely expensive. I just don't see how you make it work in unless you're like organic or something, maybe. I don't see how in the world you make that work. The cost of their stuff is just unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I hate that for you, but we'll try to glad you joined us. We'll try to guide you the right path, I think, and try to make it economical.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I
so
yeah, I
yeah, go
just
ahead.
sent this just for a little bit of background. This was the first year I owned this farm. All this fertilizing was done before I bought it, and it's the only year that the farm was corn,
Mhm.
and so I don't have any other results off of it as far as that goes for yield and stuff besides this one on corn. And my main reason for sending it was I just wanted to see if you look at the soil tests and see if there's something that needs to be addressed that you would do first, before, implementing your program on
Okay.
this farm.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a look at it. This was uh, your fertilizer. That was last year, right? Going into planting.
Yep, it was put on in the fall, and I didn't put on any fertilizer aside from fertigating then this field.
Okay, so you irrigation. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All righty. I'm just writing some notes down.
hmm
Are you still using anhydrous, Jason?
No, I only use 32%. I don't have any machinery to put on anhydrous.
Okay. Go strip to it. Okay, so this was the farmer before
Yeah, yep.
in 2020. Okay. Okay. Sap tester for 2021. Corn yield was, and this was yours, the yield in 2021.
Yep. He
Okay.
he just had that stuff done before he sold it. I was the one that raised the crop in 21 on it.
I tell you what, corn yield was 271 under irrigation with 12% green snap. That's pretty damn good corn, bub.
Yeah, I was really disappointed when it green snapped, but when we got the combine out there, it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. I wasn't keeping good records. did fertigate after each of the sap tests were taken. Okay, Joe, let's go to the next one. And see what we got here. So, for you guys, you know, you guys got to trust me on this. You know, I am not a huge fan of, I'm not saying I am a fan of pulling soil samples, but I am not a huge fan with our program, with the way we feed the crop. And I'm pretty biased on this. I really don't know of a more efficient way to feed a crop than what we do, just because you know, I don't really get too bent out of shape of nutritional levels in the soil, just because of my point is there is not a test done in the world that can tell you exactly how many pounds of PK, zinc, boron, any nutrient to put out there on your crop before you plant the crop. Does that make sense, guys? Or even guessing side dressing your crop in the season if you don't pull tissue samples. Does that make sense? The reason I say that is we've been at this for a pretty long time, and you know, I'm not bragging on our soil, but we got tons of biology, tons of fertility from manure over the years. And just like in our MACC test plot, where I pull the P and K, or the 2x2 out of my tissue sample, or out of my plot, there was a 40 plus bushel difference from us pulling just the 2x2 fertility out. And I guarantee you, any company, as far as a co-op or a nutrient that would base yields off of what our soil samples would show, the only thing they might say is hey, throw out 50 pounds of 50 to 100 pounds of nitrogen or whatever to grow it. They would say absolutely zero fertility till my great grandkids would get out there would have to be applied. So like I said, and we are actually see that the way we feed the crop. Now I'm not telling you guys to go out there and try to drive your fertility down to zero, but on our farm, what we farm, like if we pick up some rent ground or try to buy another farm or whatever, we see it's actually easier with the lower numbers, the P and K numbers, to get what we're doing, the way we're feeding, what we're spending as far as the in season Y drops and whatever. We can see a little quicker response, I guess, to what we're applying on our tissue samples. And it makes sense because the fertility, we have extremely high phosphorus, and the phosphorus is just tying every damn thing up. I mean, thank goodness we have really low magnesium in our soil, or we would have a complete cluster on our farm. But so I'm just telling you guys, you don't have to get too concerned with the way that this program works. You know, you're feeding liquid, you're running a liquid program. While we're trying to stimulate biology, we're mixing the humics, the sugars, the fulvics with it to help buffen the salts, to establish, or to not to establish, but to stimulate your biology to actually make what you're putting out there with your 2x2 program, your in-furrow, and your Y drops become way more effective than any dry program that you can buy. I mean, just the way it is. So, you know, so we'll get into these soil samples, but you guys just gotta have to trust us that, like I said, I do not pay any attention. You know, I look really the main things when I look at a soil sample is number one, let's go over and look at our pH. So let's find our pH. Soil pH is 5.4 to 6. So number one, that is the first thing that has to be fixed before you spend any more money on anything else. Or for like this coming season, I would rather see you go out and add. If can you get some high cal lime or not?
Yeah.
So what I would try to do, I would first thing try to do is get that pH to at least a 6.8 to a 7.1 at planting. That's kind of what I want to be, preferably right at 7, because during the season, your pH will drop in season. About tassel will be about the lowest that it drops all year. Then it'll slowly start climbing. So number one, at 6 on your pH, I think you're about 80% available of your fertility. So whatever you put out there, no matter what, only 80% of that's going to get to the plant.
Okay.
So that's 20%. And you get down to that 5.4, you're probably in that 60 to 65, probably 65% available. So what I would do, if this would be my farm, I would not probably go out and run a full fertility program. Whatever, I would pull back quite a bit of my fertility to spend it on high cal lime, or pellet lime will actually help try to neutralize it to become a little bit quicker available to the plant than like us around here with our high cal. We got good quality lime here, but it's really a good 2 years before we're seeing 100% effects of our high cal lime. So that's just us going out and spreading from the quarry, that lime. But the pellet lime will help you a little bit balance that out. But that's the first thing I would do. I would address my pH first.
Okay.
And then I go over and look at my base saturations, because base saturations to us means everything. So you can see, first thing, your K looks good to me. The MACC is a little concerning. Like I said, we kind of think a little different from what everybody else. In perfect world, I want to be in that 8 to 10. 10 actually being the highest on the base saturation of MACC, and the reason is, magnesium ties so much stuff up in your soil. It makes your soil tight. It just binds everything. So really, you're not. I mean, we've seen some guys with 40 and 45% base saturation. So you're actually in pretty good shape. And with you going out and throwing some high cal lime out there, you're going to knock that down pretty good on the base saturation. Your hydrogen is going to drop immediately because of it's just so acidic right now. So your hydrogen is going to drop. The other thing's kind of concerning is the salt load that's in there. And for guys that are pulling tissue samples, at least in our area, you have to ask, or we have to ask the tissue samples to actually make sure that they put salt in. Most of them don't put sodium in the tissue samples. So, and sodium is pretty important. We try to drive that down as low as we can get, because sodium does kill biology. So I recommend, if you guys are pulling soil samples, to make sure that they run it and put the sodium levels in that, because most times if you don't ask, they don't put it in there. The sodium levels, I'd like to see 0.1 all the way across. when you're getting into that, not saying that, with irrigation is a little different, but higher salt loads um, does tend to make your soil a little bit more droughty, but you're under irrigation, so it's not going to hurt you as much. But I do know that it does hamper biology growth, the salt loads, sodium loads. So actually, with your pH being that low, if you can go out and put some lime out there, you're gonna raise your calcium a bunch just by that. You should be knocking some of your uh, mag out by that, and you're gonna raise your calcium numbers, which to me, as far as on the soil sample, the calcium is my most important nutrient on there
Where
because
do you
it
like
does.
that base saturation to be on calcium?
So calcium in a perfect world, guys, my thinking is I don't want to be under 80. I want to be around that 80 mark. I want to be 80 on the calcium. I want to be under 10 on the um, magnesium, preferably down to 8. Most of our high yielding or higher, the highest yielding stuff that we have, the lower our magnesium base saturation is. We got some that's down to 5, I think. I think 5 to 4. 4 to 5 is probably our lowest bag that we have. Now, I don't know what the cutoff is, because I'm sure you can get too low with the magnesium, but we've not hit that yet. So, I do know perfect world we want to be under 10 on the magnesium. The K, we're 4 to 5, and the hydrogen will be 4 to 5, in a perfect world. But I just know that the higher, and I see that across the group too. Not saying all guys, but most of the time, the guys with higher mag struggle. They fight way more than the guys with the low mag getting nutrients into the plant. I mean, there's no question there. And it's just the magnesium issue. The magnesium is kind of the big bully. Kind of like your stepmother-in-law, or at least like my stepmother-in-law was. She was kind of a pain in the butt. That's kind of the magnesium. God bless her soul, she's passed away, but I'm just telling the truth. She was kind of my pain in the ass, kind of like magnesium. But
So I do have a question regarding calcium. So if I put on high cal lime to raise the pH, that would also raise the base saturation on calcium, right?
yeah.
And is there a way to, I mean, say you get your, I mean, I don't know how much exactly it would take to get the pH up to 7, but I mean, what if your base saturation on calcium isn't there yet? Do you use a different product then to try and keep moving your base saturation on calcium, or are you just kind of stuck where you are?
So there, as far as I know, there's really, as far as moving to raising saturation, I've seen 3 things do it. Your high cal lime is one. Gypsum is actually, if your pH is 7, or right at that 6, 8 to 7, I like gypsum. It actually gets, the calcium becomes more available quicker than what actually high cal lime does. So you can raise it with calcium or gypsum. And then, you guys are gonna giggle on this, but and say we're full of shit, but we've seen guys, and we'll have this guy on here, hopefully, or at least hopefully today he'll be on and he can answer questions if you want to ask him. He's a 5-year member, Poe Farmer. Um, he's dropped the mag and raised the base saturation of his calcium and potassium by the use of humics, just running humics. So that's what we're saying, just if you can get the salts flushed out, and you stimulate biology with the sugars, to try to promote growth of biology, it's kind of amazing how the soil, will fix part of itself. I'm not saying it's 100% fixed with the humics, but so there's the three ways that I've seen where you can raise calcium that I've ever seen. I mean, Joe, Terry, you guys got any? Craig, is Craig on here?
He's been trying to join. We've been
um,
working. He can't get his speaker and video to work.
So, Brandon, is Brandon on? I didn't look.
I haven't seen him yet.
One thing that I've seen, and we do suggest using Pell Lime. I asked about Pell Lime 10 years ago, and I found out that they make Pell Lime out of whatever lime they get. So our Pell Lime supply one time comes from a dolomitic limestone quarry, and another time it comes from a calcium. So that's another thing you might want to check, is if you get into this Pell Lime. But it is pretty effective. When you guys are down in the fives, probably that first year. And Kevin, I've always just put 2 tons of lime on. They suggest never to put much more than that. Where are you at on that?
So
online?
I mean, I can remember Grandpa on that, and here's something else too, guys. We've not had to lime. Now, granted, we run manure. We run manure from our own turkey houses, but each flock that we run, we are getting probably 1.5 tons of wood shavings, which is, acidic. But it's amazing, since we've been on this liquid program, running the sugars and the humics, we have not had to lime our farm in probably 15 years. So I'm not saying that, you guys won't have to do that, because we do have a high calcium limestone base underneath us, but I know some of our neighbors have limed 3 times since the last time I've limed. And they have a different fertility program than we do. They run manure, which everybody in my area, everybody spreads manure, but we're really, well, I shouldn't say it. 5 years ago, we were the only people that were running liquid. Now we're probably there's probably 50% people now that run liquid, and the rest run dry. And I think it's just because of the success that we're having year after year, why them guys are switching to liquid. Now, the problem is they're not running the humics, they're not running a bunch of sugars, they're not feeding the crop right, but at least they are switching to liquid, because liquid with nothing really done to it, being banded, is better than dry fertilizer without doing anything. So at least they are going to a liquid banded program. But I got kind of off track there. So what was we talking about there before?
Moving calcium based
Oh,
how much-
nutrition.
Yeah, so those are really the only ways. The amount of calcium, or amount of lime, I heard you can go up to 3 ton, but remember, anything that you do that jars stuff loose, because when you throw that much, if you go up to 3 ton, even at 2 ton, you will see that there will be a few things, some other heavy metals. Anytime you change anything, you're going to knock some stuff loose. Some stuff you want to knock loose, some stuff you don't want to knock loose. But I mean, I've heard guys have running 3 ton of lime. I'd rather see you just run, like Terry said, run a 2 ton, and then it pull your soil samples next year. See what they are. Then if you have to add some the next year, that's what I would do then. I probably would only run 2 ton at the most, at least in my area. You know, I mean, weather has a lot to do with that. You know, for guys that are drier, it's a lot harder to knock or flush anything out because you need moisture to flush anything. So you might be able to, if you're you guys out west, you might be able to run a little bit more just because you don't have the moisture to flush everything at one time. So any questions on that?
Yeah, well, we're kind of on that subject. Is there any specific level on base saturation of calcium where we shouldn't be using gypsum? Like I heard yesterday, I was talking to a guy, he said if you're below like that 60 mark, don't be using gypsum, use something else.
So is there okay, let me make sure you get this. Is there a number low enough, you said, that's too low where you don't want to use gypsum? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, you know, if your pH is neutral, I have no problem no matter how low it is to use gypsum, just because of I do know a good gypsum source compared to a good high cal lime source. I'm just talking about the availability of calcium, okay? The gypsum every time is going to be more available to the plant than what the high cal lime is. Every time. Now, I'm not saying, you know, that the high cal don't become 100%, like I said, 2 to 3 years. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, is there many guys that's below 60? Yeah, it's right here actually. I mean, I don't know. I just think, my opinion, what I've seen. I mean, I don't know. Has guys heard that before? Can Craig talk? I know Craig just sent me something and said don't, but I'm trying to figure out why.
He has
really
issues with his computer not letting him speak or see.
yeah.
So we're trying several different things, but he hasn't been able to fix it yet.
Okay.
In our area, it seems like base saturation of calcium is very correlated to soil pH. Is it that way in your area?
Well, normally, I mean, because when you spread lime, you know, most time, you know, guys are putting a 1.5 tons to 2 tons, so that's like 3,000 pounds of, you know, pretty good calcium load on it. Normally, the lower the pH, yeah, it does kind of correlate because, you know, you're adding another, you know, 600-700 pounds of pure calcium out with that 1,500 or that
210.
the 5,000 pounds if you're putting 2 ton, 2.5 tons out there. So yeah, I could say that. So normally the lower pH, yes, the calcium numbers are lower just because it, you know, you're lacking calcium on that most of the time in our area. Not saying that you know, our calcium levels, you see us, we got farms that, you know, our calcium levels go up to 7,000 ppms.
Jason, I had a question for you. Do you know when this was lime last? And gosh, what was the other question I had for you? That was that was my big question. Do you know when it was lime last? Because, oh, and I know, and if you do put this 2 ton on, I don't know if you're no-till or you work it in, but you're going to get on my no-till, if I'm not careful and I let mine get a little low, because we do have to lime often over here. it'll take about a year and a half to really 2 years to get where I think it's really helped me. So I would actually try to work that lime in as fast as possible also. But if I just, you knew when it was lime last.
Yeah, I don't know much history about the farm. I bought it in an area where it's a little ways away from where I live.
Okay.
So I don't really know much about it. To
Well,
speak of.
we found out with the high yield programs that, guys were farming around here, about every 7 years, you're going to put lime on. We found out that you need to put on every 2 to 3 years. And guys that's still using heavy amounts of dry fertilizer, I think that's what's burning a lot of it off too, because they're going for high yield. So probably some of them have used more dry fertilizer than what even it needed. And then it burnt the lime off faster. So Kevin, do you think the litter burns lime off pretty fast too? What's your opinion there? I mean, I know
Well,
you don't
the
have
litter
to.
gets,
Yeah.
there's several different litters, manures that you can use. And, we have, even though we're growing turkeys, not layers like most of the people around here get layer manure. But, there is calcium. They do run a lot of lime for the turkeys. But, I just know, I mean, the calcium levels stay up really good for us. And, we don't apply any calcium. Like I said, it's been 15 years. The only calcium I apply is what I'm getting from the manure. And you guys will understand, or what we preach about it is the numbers that the experts say of growing a crop. We will prove that wrong year in and year out. It don't take the numbers of phosphorus. It don't take the numbers of potassium, nitrogen to grow what all the experts were saying that it takes, just because of, I think everything with the dry fertilizer and not running the humics and the sugars, your biology is so dead, from the years of this beating it up, that it's not able to release what it can, do what it does naturally. I mean, we've always, every year's used this analogy, and it kind of makes you think about it. Go out into the woods. I mean, we've been cutting trees in a river bank and creek banks, but when we walk out into the woods, you go out there and you look, find a giant oak tree. I mean, we got an oak tree down here going into one of our river bottoms. There's never been any fertilizer spread around it. It's on a pasture, kind of in a rough part of the field. I mean, that oak tree is almost 6 foot on the stump. There has not been an ounce of fertilizer put in there. There's trees around it, but I mean, you think about the nutritional load it takes for that tree being that big, that many branches, that many leaves on it. And it's amazing there's not an ounce of fertility put out there. How does it get that big? Mother Nature does do a wonderful thing when we don't sit there and kill everything with the salts. We're looking at going away from Roundup. Roundup is like 4 pounds of salt per gallon. That's what it uses to help kill. Salt helps kill. I mean, you ever been around? This is what made me think about salt. 30 years ago, I part-time was a roughneck drilling rig on our farm. They hired me. I needed money, so I roughnecked, and we had some saltwater spill around some tanks at every gas well or oil well we had. And to this day yet, even with the help of manure, where they had some big saltwater spills, I mean, it won't even grow water hemp yet. And them wells have been abandoned 25 years ago, and it's still, we spread right around it. We got a oil well head or whatever in the middle of the field there, and we'll spread all the way around it. And we still got dead spots. So that's kind of what made me start thinking, a long time ago already about the effects of what salt does to biology. If water hemp won't even grow, I mean, it's pretty deadly if you can't get water hemp to grow. So like I said, we may be trying to go back with a send or something like this. I know we was talking to Poe Farmer, I think yesterday, about trying a send or going to it. And number two, we're seeing Roundup is having some issues killing some Johnson grass and stuff around here. So about all it kills anymore is just regular grass. So, but we may be trying that, doing some strips of running the sand and seeing if we can see a yield drag with a Roundup. But
Jason,
anyway,
you want to tell us what we're looking at here, Jason?
Yeah, I just had the lab while those were some grid samples on the last one, and they used the SC3 test on it, and I just had them take some random ones, and they basically, I think they call this like a water paste test to see how much is available without, adding acid to it. And this is what they came back with.
yeah. So even, which even with the water base, which I am, the acid test makes 0 sense to me because, unless it's raining acid or you're pumping acid through your pivot, why they would even run that anymore, the acid test. But the water is probably the best as far as seeing what's available. But there's the problem too, for guys that's non-irrigated, it still takes water, it's water soluble to help jar it loose. So, like I said, I don't get too crazy as far as really caring where my numbers are. I'm just more after the saturations, because after the first year or two of this program, uh, we got guys now that are adjusting our program that we run. Our program would be like the baseline for guys starting out. And then after the first year, you're going to see what you're going to have to adjust a little bit from our program. I'm just telling you, the guys that's got higher MACC levels, higher CCs, it's going to make it that much more important to especially apply your P and K. Your P and K needs to be done. I'm a liquid fan. It needs to be done at planting with the planter as much as what you can carry, just because of how hard it is to move in your soil. The heavier soil you got, the heavier magnesium load that you have in your soil. So your P and K really needs to be, even with the wide drops or even fertigation. Once you get behind, I'm telling you, once you get behind with your P and K, you're not going to catch back up. No matter what you do, what you fertigate, and really, even the guys with the lower CCs, the sandier soils, our buddy Brooks Cardinal, he's about 60 miles from me, and he's really the closest guy that I got to talk to about irrigation, because we don't do any irrigation. We were trying to work on with a company to get one pivot put on our farm, just so we can kind of understand the do's and don'ts with pivots, and try to talk to you guys a little bit what we see with pivots. But even with Brooks, I mean, he's got total different soil than what we have. I mean, he's more sandy. He's in that Most of his ground is at 6 to 8 cc's. Once he even gets behind, even with fertigate and P&K, he never catches up. And it's those. I mean, everybody in the country has issues with those two nutrients. So, and that's kind of why we like a liquid, because we know on a liquid, it's not a rock, it's not really salty. It's way more available to the plant than like potash or DAP or MAP. So that's another reason why that. But anyway, so guys, I mean, don't get overly concerned with your numbers, because you will be feeding the crop as it goes. Now, the P&K, what we say is, we start off on our program. I think we run 4 gallon right now. If you guys our numbers are a little bit lower and you have higher magnesium, higher cc's, you may have to run 5 or 6 gallons with your planter. And if it was the old stuff that we used to use, KTS, we would have an issue with mixing. But this 40-20-12 that you can get from Monty's or Concept, we mixed it with our 2x2 program. We ran up to 10 gallon with it. And the only reason we did it was just to see for guys that needs P&K up front, that has a hard time extracting it from their soil, to see if it would be a mixing issue. Now, we did not see a mixing issue with that, even at that high rate. Now, granted, when I did it, we were probably 80 plus degrees. Temperature is going to be a problem, especially for you guys up north. You may have some issues mixing that. So everything you do, you need to have a jar test, put it in refrigerator 3 or 4 days and see what it does. But I mean,
2012, you're using that for potassium?
Yeah. And when we get into looking at breaking down actually our tissue samples and the ranges that we want to be at. Now, granted, we get some sulfur from our manure there too, but most years that is really enough sulfur for me through the season. Now, depends on if we have a wet year, then I have to come in with like an ATS or something like that on my last Y drop. But most of the time, that is enough sulfur on our farm to carry the numbers that I want to be at on our tissue samples.
Okay. What are you mixing the 40-20-12 with?
So the 40-20-12 will go with our whole 2x2 program.
Oh, okay.
That'll go with zinc, boron, manganese, copper, moly, 829-2. I don't know how many things there's in there, like 9 things we mix in it. Sugar, humics.
Gotcha.
And like I said, we tried all kind of potassium sources. We tried potassium acetate. Potassium acetate is a good source of potassium, but here's my issue I had. When my numbers were above 3 on my tissue samples, for some reason, and I don't know why, but it would not push my numbers above 3 on my tissue samples. So then we went back to KTS. Well, KTS, I could get my higher numbers for some reason than I could from the acetate, but we had so much salt in the KTS with the 32% that we were running, that we've honestly, as long as we stayed no higher than 4 gallon in our mixture, we never had a mixing issue. But I do know a lot of guys had to run a lot of water, especially with the colder temperatures. The further north you went, they had to add water. Well, we're running enough gallons through our planter right now. I hate to be adding water just for the mixing issues. And then we started running the 40-20-12, and we've not had to run any water with it since then. So So it's pretty good product.
So Jason, any other questions on these two, soil samples? Or
Nope,
just-
those are just more grid samples
Okay.
from.
So I'm just looking at your CCs in an overall, your CCs are really good. Just remember, you're getting, to us, you getting in that 20 plus, that's to us is pretty damn heavy soil. Remember especially your P and K, you need to have that on pretty early because
Okay.
your soil is getting pretty heavy. As far as, which is a good thing, heavy soil, helps hold moisture and this and that, but you will have harder times, or it will seem harder to move the nutrients, and you just have to combat that by putting stuff on a little bit earlier to become more available throughout the season. I mean, really, you think about it, other than the sulfur, the P and K is really not going to go anywhere. It's not going to get flushed out really, unless it's sitting underwater for 3 weeks. It needs to be there. The P and K needs to be there available for that plant at a very young stage, because it's going to set the whole grid for the rest of the year. I mean, we learned when we were at Hefty's, they had CCs of 40 up there at the Hefty's when we did their yield contest up there on their farm. And we had to change our farm. We ran the first year we ran the same program that we ran here. And guess what? Our P and K, at that time we were wide dropping on our first V5 application. We were running half at on the planter and half at V5. And we never got our P and K numbers up to where we wanted them. For one, the ground was heavier. Number two, they didn't have near the rainfall. They get about half the rainfall we do. So the next year we come up there and changed it and put it all up there in front. Lo and behold, we won the yield challenge up there. We beat David, we beat Kevin Matthews, Dan Lucas, and we just had to change a little bit of the program. We still ran the same nutrients, the same amount. We just had to change when we applied them. So you're kind of in that same, heavier type soil. So, putting that stuff up front and being a liquid really going to help you out.
Okay.
Yeah. Kevin, we got a couple questions here in the chat. Jason, did you have anything else to say?
Oh, I was just gonna ask. I don't have a 2x2 system on my planter. If I just dribbled it on the top, I mean, is that better
So-
than doing nothing, or is that not
Oh,
very
yes.
ideal?
So, there's one thing I will say, everybody should be running. I mean, that's basically a must. You got to be running a 2x2. And,
Okay.
they make these, products where you can, or companies, or you can do it yourself, make your own 2x2 and dribble over the top. The only thing you have to do, or that I would do, is run a little bit more humic acid with it. And the reason is, in case you don't get a rain right away, that will help keep it from evaporating. Or if you do get a lot of rain, that is our stabilizer. So the humic acids do a ton of stuff that they don't get credit for all the time. But I would just add a little bit more humic acid and dribble it over the top then, off your planter in like a 2x2 situation. But yes, you can absolutely do it that way. I know there's a lot of guys that's doing it, in our group that way.
Okay.
But just remember, I would run a little bit more humic acid with it than what you normally run, just to
Okay.
make sure it's stabilized.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, those were my questions. Thanks for looking at it.
Thank you.
Jason. Kevin, we got a one question from Brian. I'd be interested in hearing what you're planning to replace Roundup with.
So accent is what I'm thinking. I can remember Grandpa and them using accent back in the day, and then Roundup come out, and nobody ran accent around here, but that's kind of what we're going to do some strips with, just to see. That's all I got for that. And
Okay,
then I see Doug's there. Does the 4.0 2012 mix well with your 9.24.3? Absolutely. There's those two products, the 9.24.3, the 8.29.2. They all mix really good with the program that we're running. We really don't see a mixing issue. Now there is an order that everything needs to be mixed, and I believe Monty's, and if you do buy stuff through Monty's or Concept, I believe they both will have, you can actually buy. Joe and Craig, you guys may want to talk on that, but I think you can get a semi-load with it all mixed together, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So I think that's, because I will tell you, there is a lot of stuff that goes in with our program. It does take a little bit of time, we're kind of the setup we have here on our farm, we're kind of brutal. I mean, we're everything we have, we got 9-10 different tanks sitting out here, and we got a cone bottom mixing tank, a 4,000 gallon mixing tank there, and we have I don't meter everything. We got marks on the side of the tanks for us when we did the individual marking, and that's how we pulled out of to each mark for each batch, and we mixed 4,000 gallon at a time. But I do recommend, if you can get it mixed, because it does take a little time mixing everything by yourself, or when you're doing it at your own farm. So
we would ask you guys, when you do that, don't order the product until probably a week or so before you need it. I think the companies are going to have to work hand in hand with you on getting these products delivered. And then I think it just makes common sense to mix it right before you use it. But we used it last year, and it just solved a lot of problems. So I would fully recommend you guys, especially don't have good mixing operations, to let the companies do it for you. So anyway, all right.
So
Just so everybody can see a SAP test. This is one that Jason sent me. What a SAP test looks like.
So one quick thing here, Jason. I just had a guy come in and sent me a text and said, do not use gypsum below 60 on the soil sample.
On your base saturation.
On the base saturation, yeah.
Okay.
So if you're above 60, you can use gypsum, but below 60, they said don't use gypsum.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So SAP, here we go again. I really can't help you because, like I said, it was kind of it boggled my mind. It was just kind of opposite of what I seen on my tissue samples. So, Jason, I'm really sorry that I can't help you on the SAP testing.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I've switched, so I'll be able to work with your program a little better.
So here's the thing about the soil samples, guys. The tissue samples. So once you get, 2-3 years under your belt, the main thing is, and you'll see why we do the feeding, the timing of the feeding, why we do it the V5 and the V10. We carry a heavy enough load with the planter that, I know I farm. I know you can't get in there every year exactly at V5. I understand that. But you're carrying enough load with the planter that you don't have to, not saying and don't want to, but you don't have to get in there at V5. Excuse me. You can get in there V6, V7, and I'm not too concerned about losing any yield there. But you know, in a perfect world, we go out and wide drop at V5, come back in V10, because there's different stages in the plant's life that we can manipulate more ovules, and that's really what I'm after. Every year, I try to have more ovules than what I had the year before, because Mother Nature normally don't manipulate yield near as much as far as yield potential to at the bottom line as your total yield. You know what I'm saying? We don't have the pollination that early. You know, we're just going after more ovule count year after year. So, but you know, when the reason I like the V10, you know, when we get a rain, normally we can stimulate a little bit longer. You know, that plant got a little burst of food, different food, you know, upped its resources. We can normally elongate the ears a little bit more, ovules. So there is a reason why we wide drop at V5 and V10. You know, you're just trying to pass the torch all through that growing point of that corn plant before it gets into reproductive, to think it's feeling as good as what it can. That's about all I got on that. So we can go ahead and get through them, Joe.
All right,
Okay.
so this is Alfred, one of our new members that joined from Kenya. Alfred, you want to come on, unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about it? I've got some soil samples that he sent after this.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So I don't know if we tackle the questions first or we go through the soil sample.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
we'll go through the questions first, Alfred.
Yeah. So first question is basically all about just selection of the right hybrid. And so since there's so many hybrids out there, and do you have like an evaluation criteria you use when sort of what you're going to plant? Or because you find that most salesmen or saleswomen just try to push products on you and you're not sure exactly what is right, what is wrong until you plant it, and then you probably realize the challenges with a particular breed.
Yeah. Good question there, Alfred. So number one, yes, I don't always plant what the salesman tells us to plant. The big reason is, like on our farm, the only time I really go away from the super high yielding genetics is like on our hills that they're kind of steep. Some of the hybrids, and I plant all decob. I'm not telling you what hybrids or what company to plant, but like on the decob side, on our hills, that is hard for me to get in and spray late. I normally try to plant our hills with a southern rust, because we do get southern rust about every year. So I plant on our hills a southern rust traded corn, just because of, you know, a big corn, driving over it, trying to spray a fungicide on it, we'll drive over quite a bit of corn. So some of the hybrids we know that are not quite as high yielding. But I know that like in 2016, Southern Rust come in the year before we had our own sprayer. It come in and knocked about 100 bushel an acre off. The Southern Rust did. So the stuff that is hard for me to get over late in the season, I kind of protect that with certain traits. For us, I don't know if you guys can get traded corn down there in Kenya. Can you?
No.
No. Okay. So that's how we do one thing. So number two, everybody should be planting their own test plot of hybrids. And the reason I say that is when you feed the crop the way we do with this program, you make hybrids react different than what most test plots have. Most hybrid, like in our area, there's nobody that does what we do in our program that's as precise and trying to feed the crop and manage it the way we do. So you'll find out, even though everybody else in the area likes, and I'm gonna just throw some numbers out. Say a 6744 hybrid everybody loves or don't like, whatever. But for us, the way we manage 6744, up till the last 2 years, it was the highest yielding genetics that we planted on our farm. But most people didn't plant it because the disease health wasn't real good on disease. It had a horrible root structure. A lot of guys had some lodging, but when you feed the crop correctly throughout the whole season, and spray fungicides to keep it healthy, I mean, it was beating the tar off of everything else in their lineup, in the decob lineup, up till the new genetics. So I recommend everybody needs to be planting whatever company that you use, picking out their hybrids and testing them yourselves, because like us, we don't plant anything. We try to plant as long as season corn that we can. So 120-day corn is really the longest corn in the United States that you can get. And that's what we try to plant as full a season as we can, because we try to feed that crop throughout the whole year. And what makes yield is how long you can keep that plant packing starches, proteins into that kernel. I mean, like when we plant a hybrid plot, our decob guys, I mean, nothing, they won't even put nothing in our plot anymore that's less than 114 day, because the 112-day corn is 40, 50, 60 bushel off of what the full season corn is. And it's just because of grain fill time. They'll have the same kernels, same kernel counts, but the ears are not near as heavy as what the full season corn is. So we like planting as full season corn as what we can. But we test every year. We test on our management what hybrids, and like I said, we protect the plant. So I don't care if it's a really nasty disease, disease infested crop or hybrid. That doesn't bother me, because we're making enough passes with our sprayer for the fungicides to keep it healthy, and we're feeding the plant the whole year with our program. So that's kind of what I do on our farm, and 99% of the time it's always the fuller season corns. Now you will have some exceptions. When 6208 come out, 6208 was actually a 112-day corn that actually did out yield some of the fuller season corn. So we did plant some of that. But, the bottom line is I want the highest yielding genetics that I can get, just because we can eliminate a lot of the issues that the hybrids have just by management. So,
Yeah, I've got a comment on that, Kevin. These guys starting out, I hope we've told them before, but getting this seed out of the ground all at the same time is a super important thing on this program. And you probably want to watch your how fast this seed comes out of the ground. But Kevin, won't you go on and talk a little bit about seed sizing, and knowing that when they pull a handful of seed out of that bag, if it's not, go and talk about that.
Yeah.
Bag.
So we actually switch back to bags from the bulk, mini bulks or totes or whatever. For some reason, it seems like we could get a little bit bigger seed corn when they're in bags. I don't know why, or just the way it happens, but I tried to plant as big a seed as what I can, and I try to plant rounds. And there's a reason to that. So when you think about an ear growing, what is the first ears or the kernels on the cob that an ear puts on? The butt, right? The butt ears or the butt kernels. So when the corn goes through stress, what do they abort from the tip? So they start coming back on the tip. So normally there is a little bit more energy in the large rounds just because it's at the butt of the ear. And we feel like when you pull your tissue samples, you can see this. Just go out and take a large round tissue sample at like 350 GDUs, and then go out and take a small round or a small flat and pull its tissue sample. I will bet you that the tissue sample at 350 GDUs will be a lot higher on the bigger seed, the round, just because of, you know, the energy that big kernel has. You know, naturally, the bigger the seed, the more energy it should have, and it really shouldn't affect us as that much, because one thing that we've done in the last 7-8 years, we've changed our planting of our corn. And this year here, or 2023, was a prime example. You know, we planted the earliest corn we planted in the last 6-7 years was last year, and that was May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And now the weather forecasts were wrong. Part of the, was part of the problem. When we planted that, they were only calling for like a tenth or two of rain, inch of rain, 1/10 or 2/10 of an inch. And lo and behold, we got 3 or 4 inches right after we planted it. So we did not have even emergence, but the stuff that was planted May 20th ended up being 30 to 40 bushel better, just because of being even emergence, rapid growth. So it did not go through any trouble there. So even emergence is where you can pick up 30, 40 bushel easy just by having an even emergence. So we've learned not to jump out there and plant real early. It is more important to have an even emergence than planting early. You're just helping your odds. If you can get your corn crop out of the ground in 4 to 5 days, that's what you got to do. You got to have that even emergence, because the thicker that you plant, the more prevalent that becomes, fighting for sunlight, because there's only so much sunlight out there. And once it gets behind, it never catches up, no matter what you do. I don't care if you go out there and fertilize it, just that one stalk, to try to catch it back up. It just don't catch back up. So even emergence is key. And that's kind of why, we feel a little bit safer that if we do have a bad weather event, that the corn will have enough energy with the big seed to push through and try to stay as even emergence as what it can with the big seed. That's just what we see on our farm. So yeah, we'll plant 60-pound seed if we can get it through the company. So any questions on that?
No, that's sufficient on my side.
Okay.
I think the second point I have is on the planting population. So do you plant sort of same population all across the farm, or kind of different populations for different blocks, or what's the right approach to do this?
So there's a rule of thumb that we run. If we can get 1 bushel per 100 plants. So what I'm saying is, if you're planting 20,000 plants, you should be growing 300 or 200 bushel corn. If you're planting 30,000, you should be getting 300 bushel corn. Then if I'm at that threshold, then I'll start bumping my population up a little bit. But the minimum is for us, so if we're planting, let's say we're planting 32,000 plants per acre. If I'm not growing 300 bushel corn, I'm probably planting too thick. You know, there's other things that you can spend money on other than buying seed corn, more seed to gain bushels. Does that make sense? I mean, these hybrids, and I don't care what company you plant from. You know, we used to think, when you think about a flex ear, when they say flex ear, I mean, no offense to the companies, when they come out and say, well, you got to plant this hybrid a little thicker because it don't flex as much as the other ones, they're full of crap, because when you feed a crop correctly, they all flex. It may not be on ear length, but it could be on kernel depth, kernel width, and kernel weight. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of our rule of thumb. You know, we actually backed our population off a little bit. Now, this was the first year that we ever had a high population be our highest yield. And when I say a high population, I'm saying above 42,000 for a contest. And you sit there and you think about a contest, and I know we don't need to be, you know, we're not here to talk about contests. I don't know what that was, but my point of the story is, on my highest yielding ground, on my, you know, the less stress ground, the ground that holds the moisture the best and do this, that we can manage the best. If I can't support, you know, planting at 40,000, if I can't grow 400 bushel corn on 40,000, what makes me think that I can manage and do everything correctly, and the ground do what it's supposed to do to be planting 36, 38,000 and only growing, you know, 280 bushel corn? That makes no sense to me. You know, there's a lot of other things that we could be spending that money on, you know, more humics, more sugars, more this and more that you can. I think you'll get a lot better ROI by spending it on anything else than other bumping your population up. Because once you start bumping your population up, you start running into standability issues. Your corn starts getting taller, and it creates more of a heat issue. That's our biggest problem, you know, in southern Indiana. You know, our daytime temperatures don't get stupid hot, but the problem is we have so much humidity where, you know, the corn plant can't release the heat at night, and it keeps that heat tucked in a canopy, and that will eliminate more yield than a drought for me, from what I've seen. The heat is the issue. So if you have less plants out there, you can release that heat at night to let that corn respirate and gain more yield. So odds are you're probably planting too thick. I mean, if you're, like I said, if you're planting 32, 33,000 and you're not growing 300 bushel corn, I would probably back my population off. Just for that reason, you know, knowing that, you know, we're sacrificing yield and adding undue stress just to have more plants out there that's not gaining us anything. So, did that help you on that? I mean, we're probably planting a little thick. They're coming at 7:40. We'll probably shut them off at 2:00.
At 2:00?
Yeah. Sorry, guys. We're getting ready to sell birds tonight again. No. Okay.
Hey, Kevin.
So, yeah.
I got a quick question. I'm Jason again. You just looked at my soil sample stuff. So I was thinking about in regards to this last thing you were talking about, planting at 35,000, with implementing your program this year. Is that is that too aggressive, you think? Should I start more conservative?
Well, so I'm not going to tell a guy what to do, and I think that has, some hybrids do flex more than others, without a doubt. Um, I'm just, I'm familiar with the decop numbers. I'm not with really the other hybrids, but I do know if you have like 6835, 6606, those two hybrids, not only do they flex on kernels, depth, length, width, but they also extremely flex long on kernel counts. So if you are growing, I don't know what your yield range is going to be, but with them hybrids, I mean, we had 6606 on a hill that was planted at like 28,000 on a hill, and we had strips in it that was making 350 bushel.
Okay.
So hybrids like that, those two hybrids, I would back off a little bit. In fact, our 48,000 that we did our 425, I think we overpopulated that. Now, part of the problem was for us, part of the reason I think that was our highest yield, but the best of our corn got wiped out from the tornado. I still think even with those hybrids there that we'd have been in that 43,000, we'd have probably been, in that 470, 475 range on our better dirt. But so I don't know. You're gonna have to think of your reality of your potential. So if you think you can grow 350 bushel corn, you got the potential. Then I say, yeah, 35,000, but if you're in that 300 to 325, I would probably be in that 33,000. Just me thinking on my own. And I do say this, that's kind of why we plant, we'll plant several different populations across the farm. But the only way you're going to learn is making a strip or two at a higher population and see what it does. I mean, every year we plant thick. I mean, we've done this for almost 20 years where we've been planting way high, just for one strip. And that's what I'm saying. Last year was the first time we ever had that high of population.
Do you see
Be
yield
our
drag?
highest yield.
Do you see
Oh,
yield
yes.
drag with it, or just
yes.
no improvement? Okay.
Yield drag.
Okay.
Yield drag. And when I'm saying yield drag, it seemed like once we got, other than 2023, once we got above 44,000, we would see about a 40 to 50 bushel yield drag.
Wow, that's very significant.
Yeah. So, and that's what gets me on some of these seed corn companies that, you see their gin trials, that the yield just keeps going up and up and up on their gin plots. And I'm like, how in the heck can you say that your yields are going up when we're managing it the best that we absolutely can? And we're, all of a sudden we see a 40, 50 bushel drop. You got to remember, them companies are there to sell seed corn. So, yeah, I mean, I think best thing to do is, plant a few strips at that higher pop, but depending on the hybrids, 350 bushel corn, there's no reason why 35,000 won't make 350 bushel corn if you're doing stuff correctly. So if you're shooting for 300 bushel corn, if you're doing everything correctly, 30,000 should be enough. But that's kind of what we're at, you know, where we're non-contest corn, where we're trying to grow 320, 330 bushel corn. We'll be in that 32, 34,000 for us.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So back here on Alfred soil samples, let's see here. Looking for pH.
pH is at the first one. For this one is 5.69.
So 5.6. So that would be the first thing, Alfred, I'd work on. We need to get that up to about 7. Preferably, 6, 8 to 7 at planting. So I don't know if you have any lime you can get, because let's see, does it have ppm for calcium? Let's see, calcium. Yeah, so you're pretty low on. I'm guessing that's ppm, ain't it, or is that pounds? Yeah, it's ppm. So you're pretty low on calcium, so that would be a good thing to throw some high cal lime out if you can get it. Do not throw what's base saturations here.
It's down at the bottom. See right here.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, you're pretty low on calcium on the base saturation. That'll help drive that bag down a little bit. And that'll help your hydrogen out, bringing that pH up. So what is the other bases? That's first time I ever seen that.
Not sure as well.
Has anybody else ever seen that, other bases down there on his base saturations?
Oh, I see. Well, some places, we talk about it totaling 100, which it did here. So there's calcium, magnesium, potassium, hydrogen, sodium. Gosh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's got me kind of be interested to see what it is, because that's the first time I've ever seen that. Could you ask your
Yeah, I could
whoever
do that.
took them what that
Good luck.
is?
I could do that maybe tomorrow as
Yeah.
well.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I'd be curious. I don't think I've ever seen that. But that would help you out a bunch. I mean, that'll get you some more calcium in your soil, and that'll help raise your base saturation, your calcium, and drop your mag down a little bit.
So that's
Alfred,
one.
I'm curious. Danny Best, or Donnie Bester, he farms down at in South Africa, down around Belfour. It's about an hour or two from Johannesburg, and he was saying that their forms of fertilizer is pretty well junk. Do you guys have a pretty good source of fertility down there, or is it pretty rough like what he's got?
Yeah, so we face the same problem. You really have to be careful with the company that you use and most of the fertilizer here is basically dry fertilizer. In fact, this year I will try to import myself, for example, UN32. So because it's available here, so I'm actually just placed an order as well for it yesterday.
So the reason I asked this, when we was down there at Donnie's place, he had a big field day. There was like 500 farmers at his field day, and we were talking about different types of fertilizer, and the one farmer stood up, and it was an all common theme there. They were griping about the quality of even 32%. It had a pH of 2.5. So I would make sure that I would check it to see the pH on it, because you may be doing more harm than good by throwing that kind of low acidic pH. I mean, that's almost heck, that's hydrochloric acid almost pH there. So I would definitely test some of the products before you buy them, just to be on the safe side down there, because you think you might be getting ahead by going to a liquid program, but if the quality is that bad, I don't know if you could get enough humic acids out there to help buffing some of the stuff. So, and I'm guessing there'll be a lot of inert heavy metals and stuff that's going in, just probably not a good product. But be sure to test some of that stuff before you buy it.
Yeah, Danny just.
And is there a particular ratio?
Do what?
Yeah, so I was just saying, for example, when using humics or to buffer salts and stuff, is there a particular ratio that you work with, for example, or just?
So we try to in a season, we try to run about 4 to 5 gallons of humic acid throughout the season.
Okay.
So which I'm looking at your salt load, sodium load. I mean, you're not horrible, 0.73. We've seen some guys that had over 4 on the sodium level. So you're not, by no means is that bad. But I think for you, if you could find a good source, and that's the problem, every company, it seems like anymore, has a humic acid out there. There is a difference in the humics. Make sure you get a good source. I don't know if Monty's or Concept Ag has any dealerships overseas like that or not. I mean, you may have to talk to Joe Dedman or Craig Barbell here to see if they do, because they both got really good humics. There's, over the years, I'm not by any means saying we're an expert, but we have had a lot of years of running different types of humics, and I will promise you there is definitely a difference in the humics that's out there. So just make sure you're trying to buy. I know it's hard over there, but make sure you try to buy some good quality stuff over there.
Right.
Hey, Kevin, I'd like to clean up the chat room here
Okay.
before we go a bit further. I think I asked Donnie to be on for the soybeans, so I don't think he can get on here and tell us in a minute, but he's got limited time. So to start with, the final stand versus planting population, what % of your plant population are you expecting to get to a harvestable ear?
So we're not at 100% germ, but we're probably at, so if we're planting, say we're planting 34,000, we are basically at 33.8, 33.9. So we're pretty close to 100%. But as far as the harvestable years, I want to be above 99% on our farm. Even though this is what's funny, we test, we cold germ test all of our seed that we get, and I recommend guys doing that. And even at that, I don't know. I think, even though some of the corn will say 98% germ, I think with the habitat that we throw the corn in with what we got, that's why we're getting basically, I mean, we're well above 99%, almost 199.5, probably what we're at as far as emergence. So basically we're pretty close to what we plant at as far as emergence. I mean, harvestable ears. So
Okay. Dan
Hey,
was on
Kevin.
here. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, this is Craig. I think I can finally talk, maybe. This has been one frustrating morning with the Zoom with my stuff. It's on my side. But going back to those other bases on this soil test, Neil Kinsey reports instead of CEC, cation exchange capacity, he uses TEC, which is total exchange capacity, where the other bases would be your things like iron, manganese, copper, zinc, anything that's a cation, and they add that into these other bases. If that makes sense.
yeah, to some extent, it does what he's saying does make sense, but it's interesting. Okay, so that would actually raise, well, like your CEC, then by doing that, saying your CEC is 15, by saying what he's saying, so you would really be at probably like a 17. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, not really, because CEC is a measure of the clay and organic matter in a soil, which then you take your cations, which gives you these percentages. And so it's just a different way. I mean, Neil Kinsey, I don't completely understand Neil Kinsey's TEC. Joe, do you?
No, not really. But he does say that about total CEC, and he brings in other minor cations into the whole picture.
Yeah.
Well, some of the stuff Neil says, I scratch my head, but I mean, he's a smart dude, but I think sometimes we can make this too complicated. But I mean, if we get that technical, we'll probably be growing 626 bushel corn, I guess. But I mean, you're right. There's other measurements, but I don't know. I'm just familiar with the CEC. I mean, not saying that's wrong or right, but that is interesting. I've heard him talk once or twice, and no offense, I haven't really heard it talk to it or paid much attention to him since then. But I don't know.
Okay. Dan wasn't on the meeting early, and I think this was answered.
Wait. Okay.
Can you not hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay, Dan wasn't on the meeting early, and it might have been answered, but he's asking, so if you've been planting 36,000 and getting 200 to 250 bushel, I should go back to 25,000 and go up. And just reiterate that real quick, and then we'll move on.
So Dan, if you're planting 36 and getting 200, 250, I would probably back it down to 30,000. Where are you from, Dan?
He's Canada.
Yep. Southern Ontario, Canada.
Okay. So I'm trying to think here. So you're on shorter season. I mean, you're like 90-day corn.
We're like they call our area like 2,700 heat units. And honestly, that's a shove for us to get there. This past year we did not have that. So I'm growing so like my top my let's call it warmest corn would be 89, 90 up to like 91 day corn.
So with you being that far north, so temperature should not be a issue as far as heat, right? I mean,
No.
Okay,
Generally,
so-
we never get too hot, and we never really dry out.
so you're kind of in a little different scenario just because of the heat thing. Now, I'm not saying for you being that far north, because for one, you're planting basically 30 days shorter corn than what we are. So you're
Right.
not going to have the grain fill period that we are. So it's going to probably be a little harder for you to reach, you know, to be that efficient, I'm guessing, just because of your heat units. So I don't know. So you would be an exception being that far north. I don't think backing off 25,000. I'd say planting 30 would be probably your minimum for 250.
Yeah.
So I would
And,
I would back off 5,000-6,000 plants and see what you do.
Yeah, I just got my decal corn seed book out here, and I'm trying to find the variety. I think it's a new one for our area, and I just remember coming across it with a rep, and yeah, the I don't see it here for some reason. This particular variety suggested to plant, and so this is for our area. Suggested planting of 38,000. And so I'm just going back to touch on what you had said earlier.
Yeah.
These guys are in business to sell seed.
Yeah, I mean, I would be in that 30 to 32 at most.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
And that's where we had been years ago. And of course we just start pushing it up because more is better, right? And
Yeah.
anyhow.
I mean, the way I look at it is, we talked about 60. You wasn't on earlier, but we were talking like the day corn, the 100. We don't plant anything under 114 day corn.
Yeah.
But we had that 6208, which was 112 day corn that would yield with the big boys, the 120 day corn. But we plant. How old is that hybrid now? That's probably 10 years, 11 years old, 6208. Does anybody know, Terry?
Well,
How old would
that would have come out in 08, wouldn't it?
Okay, so 15 years old.
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
We planted that against 6744 like 3 or 4 years ago. We went away from 6208, but we said, well, we'll just try it because it was the king on our farm.
Yeah.
It was like 30 bushel off of the newer hybrids, and planted the same population, had the same kernel count, but the hybrids have just changed, through the breeding that the kernels are, and that's what we get paid by. We don't get paid by kernel count. We get paid by kernel weight.
Right.
And I think that just the breeding has gotten so much better over the years that these hybrids flex. I mean, I don't care what they say. When they sit there and say it's not a flex hybrid, they're full of shit because the kernels get huge
Right.
and heavy. So, my honest opinion, I would back it off. I mean, I don't see where you got to plant. I don't see any scenario where you got to plant 38,000 to grow 250 bushel corn. That makes no sense to me.
Right. I'm better off taking those dollars and putting it into nutrition
Yes.
at a lower population.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
I mean, and it's going to help you on your standability. It's, help you on drought because you got more root mass. That's just my opinion. I think it's too thick. I mean, I don't care where you're planting at. I mean, you should not have to plant 38,000 to grow 250 bushel corn anywhere.
Yeah, I can back, $25 or $30 out of seed and put that into more liquid starter program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, and then, let's see. Was there a reason given for not using gypsum if your base saturation isn't over 60? Just trying to learn. I thought I have is that pH and calcium base saturation seem to correlate. And if you aren't at least 60, you need high cal lime, which should raise your calcium base saturation. That's from Jason again.
Well, we're going to let our buddy Craig
It's
answer this one.
okay.
So Craig,
Okay, so let me take a stab at this. When your calcium parts per million, all right, is below 1200, or when your calcium pounds based on a soil test is below 1250, you should not be using gypsum. Doesn't matter what your base saturations are. The reason being is that when you use gypsum, when your pounds on a soil test is below 1250, the calcium will react with sulfur and some other things and will crash further your calcium numbers. So, and I got in late on that conversation. I didn't know what the conversation was about as far as, are you trying to raise pH or trying to raise calcium, or both?
Both of them.
So, and I don't remember that soil test, but in that case, if the pH was it in the 5s, something like that?
Yeah, it's 5.4. The other one, Joe.
That one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so your parts per million, if we just take that first one, calcium parts per million is 2024. If this was a 6-inch sample, you would double that to get into pounds. So you have over 4,000 pounds of calcium, which is fine. All right. If you wanted to use gypsum, let's say your pH was in the 6s, but you wanted to try to raise base saturation calcium, then you could use gypsum. In this case, I think I'm understanding this question, get the soil pH up. All right. You wouldn't use gypsum because gypsum does not affect your pH at all. All right. But calcium, an ag lime like you were talking about, Kevin, would be the choice here to help raise that pH.
And just to
The
add,
hydrogen, the base saturation hydrogen is high. All right. Typically that tells you that you've got a low pH, which correlates here. But then the question is, why is that hydrogen high? A lot of times when you have a continuing renewal source of organic substances, like in river bottoms, residue, maybe you cleared some trees and there's roots there, that's continuing to break down and giving you hydrogen in your soils. Biology will a lot of times will help with that hydrogen, reducing the hydrogen, because when they exhale carbon dioxide, CO2, the oxygen is going to combine with 2 hydrogens and make water, therefore reducing your hydrogen base saturation, all right, which would then increase your calcium base sats, if that makes sense.
yeah, thank you. And just to add a little context, the reason that gypsum got brought up was because I had asked if you put on the high cal lime and get your pH close to 7, but you still want to move your calcium base saturation higher, what are some methods of doing that? And that's how that all got brought up.
Yeah. That's probably the most economical.
When you get your pH up, your base saturations are going to raise.
So what if the pH is as good and I want to build calcium, but my levels of calcium is under the number that you're saying don't apply gypsum to?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So my pHs are good. They're like 6, 8, 7, 7, 1. but calcium is super low, but my number for the calcium is less than what you're saying to apply gypsum for. What are my options that way? What would you do?
So the pounds of calcium on a soil test are what? Or the parts per million?
Say anywhere from, I'd say an average on this one here is 1100.
ppms.
PPMs.
Yeah, ppm.
Well, then you'd be high enough because you times that by 2,
Yep.
and you're at 2,200 pounds then.
Okay, so I'm good then. That's what you would do. So on my base saturations, let's say calcium average is around 70%. So that's always our thing, is try to get calcium up option wise. So that's why I was thinking the gypsum, and we got a source here about not even an hour away.
Yeah.
You'd be fine.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, you ready to move on to Dalton's?
Yeah.
Hey, one question here. Donnie, do you got much time, or do you have to go right away?
Oh gosh, no. I'm sitting here. We do have a rain event at the moment here. So if the weather permits, I'm in no rush, so that's fine.
Well,
If you don't go
so,
now, it'll be after lunch.
so do you want to go ahead and do it now, Donnie, or not?
No, I'm fine. No, you can just continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. Donnie's kind of our soybean expert. We're gonna have him talk here probably right after dinner. I mean, he's soaking in his money right now because he's catching the rain again. So sees all smiles there. But anyway, let's keep going then.
Okay, you want to read it, or do you want to read it, Kevin?
I can read it, I guess.
Yeah,
I
go
farmed
ahead.
this for 10 years, and it's been a corn soybean rotation. I've only been fertilizing when it's corn. Application rate average are 25 phosphorus elemental pounds and 6 elemental pounds potassium every other year with strip till, and average yields have been 274 bushel corn and 73 bushel beans. My soil P and K levels have stayed the same since 2013. Soil biology must be releasing tied up P and K as fast as I'm removing them, or crop removal rates are not accurate. What do you think the crop removal rates of P and K are for corn and soybeans? So we hit that a little bit earlier. I don't know exactly to the pounds what the P and K removal rates are, but this is exactly what I'm saying. I think it's funded by these fertilizer companies when they come out with these removal rates, because kind of like we've been running our program forever. It's been 30 years since we ran any dry fertilizer other than manure, and we've been running two tons an acre for the manure forever on our farm. And there for a long time, we never even ran any P and K other than our manure. And, the last 12, 13 years, we've been running the 2x2x2. And actually our numbers, and we're only running 4 to 5 gallon on most acres, and our numbers are actually climbing. So I'm glad you said this, Dalton, because 100%, I 100% do not believe the removal rates are remotely close to what the experts are saying. I mean, just because we're not applying enough for the yields that we're growing for what they were saying on removal rates. I mean, we should be down to 0 on our P and K numbers. I think it's a combination of, one, it don't use as much, and number 2, I think Mother Nature, once you lower your dry fertilizer rates, she starts doing what she's intended to do your whole life, is manufacture it for you, being untied. So yeah, I'm 100% firm believer that the removal rates are way wrong, but to sit there and tell you exactly what I think they are, I can't tell you because I don't know, but I just know it's not near as high as what they're saying. I mean, you got to remember most of these tests that these companies do, universities and all that, they're not banding, the potash or the DAP, like where you strip tilled, you're banding your fertility. So the 100% of your fertility, the roots are getting to. You're not getting tied up in residue and this and that. So most of these have been broadcasted fertilizer. P and K don't move real well through the soil. So basically, if your roots don't hit it, it don't get it. And you're only using, if you're on 30-inch rows, you're only using roughly 30% of the soil of the 30 inches for your P and K. So yeah, if you're throwing, guys are broadcasting 200, 210 pounds of, or 180 pounds of potash, you're only getting about 5 to 7 pounds of available potassium to the plant. So 100% do I believe that them numbers, the universities and the fertilizer companies are wrong. It's false advertisement because they get to sell a lot more product that way. So yeah. Would it pay to apply micronutrients past 2,000 GDUs? How would you apply them? So on my program or on the MACC program, I've not seen it. I'm not seeing even an ROI, let alone a yield bump. I mean, I've not seen a yield bump, let alone an ROI on past that long. So now that's having the nutrients, which I don't know if we have a slide to show you where, Joe, where we want our nutrients. We don't have to show that. If we have it, we can get to it later. But where our nutrients are, where our graph wants to be, I've not seen a yield bump, let alone an ROI on applying micros that late.
Talking about this one?
Well, that's kind of, that's our contest stuff. I was talking about like our, was that 2 or 3 years ago we had our 300 bushel
Yeah.
yielding. But on your high yielding stuff, I mean, if you have numbers this high, like on this corn here that you're seeing, there's no way that you would see, as far as I'm concerned, you would see any benefit of applying any micros on this after 2,000 GDUs. That I will just about guarantee you that. But there's a reason, I always said that, if and foliar guys, don't get mad at me when I say this, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't see a benefit out of foliar feeding, because we do all the work with the Y drops and we have a balanced nutrition there. Why I don't see a yield bump from foliar feeding anything. Now, we may go out and try it again. I mean, every year we do try a little bit of something, and I normally have a yield drag because I normally burn some of the leaf tissue. So now I'm not saying if you don't have numbers close to what we were having that you couldn't see a yield bump. But as far as my testing on our farm, I have yet to see a yield bump by doing any foliar feeding really at any time on our farm. So any questions on that? Okay. So have you tried kelp or seedweed extracts and had success? Rates, timing, placements. Here's another one. I'm guessing you're talking about stress mitigation. No, I have not seen any yield bumps in that. My theory is a well balanced corn plant is what it takes to do stress. We was up at Michigan this year. We had the same questions talking about stress mitigation. And the bottom line is, I've always told them, I said, here's the issue with on the way our program is set up. I'm not saying that you can trick the plant into saving a few kernels during pollination or through R2, R3. You can keep from aborting, but chances are you might have, 3 or 4 kernels longer on your ear, but chances are you don't have enough nutrition. If you're seeing a bump in that, bump in the kernel count, you don't have probably enough nutrition in the plant where your kernels will end up being lighter. I mean, the bottom line is what I've seen on our testing, chasing high yields or chasing field averages, nutrition is king. A balanced diet seems to be the best thing for stress mitigation than any product that we've ever tried yet on our farm yet. So I don't know if you're getting a hint that, I'm not a big snake venom juice fan yet. I've not seen a product with the program that we run to see a gain in bushels. I mean, our high yielding corn, our contests where we try everything that you can try in spots, we've still not seen a benefit of any of that stuff over our program. So I don't know. I mean, I see some of these other companies saying 40, 50 bushel over their standard grower product program. I'm just wondering how bad their standard growing program really is if you can see that kind of a benefit by spraying a foo-foo juice over the top and you can gain 40 bushel. You must have some pretty bad issues on your normal program if you can spray one thing and gain 40 bushel, 50 bushel. So, I mean, anybody else seen anything? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm being as honest as I can, guys. I mean,
Kevin, I'd like to add on the soybeans, kelp and or any seaweed extracts for me is a no-go. I know a lot of guys say that the cytokinin will help you retain some flowers, but I haven't seen that. I've tried that maybe 4 or 5 years in a row, and everywhere where I ran kelp or seaweed extract, actually when it got like last year when we had like a dry January, there wasn't any stress mitigation. As a matter of fact, the one field, that 80 acres that I treated was my poorest yielding soybeans. I just think on beans, maybe, the cytokine and playing with that wrong timing, it's definitely a no-go. And even on corn, I haven't also been able to see anything. And I think I want to say this, same as you say, if you're getting like a 40, 50 bushel bump, you've got issues on other things that you have. Then there's, like a standard program doing 40, 50 less. That's just too big of a jump just coming out of kelp. I haven't seen that. So that's just my 2 cents I'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some pretty severe issues if you can. I mean, we would all, believe me, I would love to see something that you can just spray out and gain you even, on the corn, 10, 15 bushels, soybeans, 5 to 6 bushels. But I mean, guys, I'm telling you, it just, we've not found it. And, you know, not that I've tested a lot on soybeans, but on corn, we've done a crap load of testing of products, and we just don't see any benefit out of when you have, I mean, a moral of the story is a healthy, balanced nutrition plant, from what I can tell you, what we see is going to outdo any miracle stuff that you can spray on. That's all I can tell you from all the studies that we've done. And believe me, I mean, we have tried and still try a bunch of other products, and we just don't see any benefit, period. Like I said, we're still going to keep, you know, there's a lot of new products coming out. You know, we'll keep testing, but we don't have luck with it on our place. So, any questions? I mean, guys, we're here. I mean, this is the time to be asking questions, you know. There's not a dumb question.
He'll go on to his next one then.
Okay. 2 years ago, I wide dropped 10 acres with 25 gallon of KTS at 1,000 GDUs. It never showed up in my tissues, and there was no yield difference. Well, we kind of talked about that earlier. You know, the P and K needs to be on early, and probably at that rate of 25 gallon of KTS, you probably did a little bit of biology damage, because there is some salt, quite a bit of salt in the KTS. And truthfully, it's a wonder. I figured you would have seen a yield drag. Actually, I figured it would have took it down, because you're adding that kind of load of KTS at that timing. You know, you're getting ready, you're going, you know, you're in the rapid root growth, your corn plant's still growing fast. Dalton, are you guys, I'm guessing you guys are probably irrigated. Dalton, are you on?
Yeah, he should be.
Save his.
Well, either way, so actually, I mean, that kind of load, I'm really surprised that the yield did not go down, honestly. That's actually probably a good thing that it stayed even. I would have bet 25 gallon, it probably should have went down. So, you know, remember your P and K needs to go, the heavier soils, the earlier it needs to go on. And 25 gallon is way too much. So yeah, that was no surprising there, other than I figured it would actually had a yield drag on that. Before planting, what do soil nutrients levels need to be up in the top 6-8 inches to grow 400 plus bushel corn? Well, there we go again. You know, I think once you get into that high a level, I think you need, as far as nutrient levels, you know, I don't know what's in the levels need to be in the soil. We've only done it twice. All I could tell you is what our tissue samples need to be. And we will get to our tissue samples on our 425, what they were. You know, I've said this several times. I really don't care what's in the soil, you know, just because it's all about what gets out of the soil and into the plant. You know, that's, you know, we grew 341 bushel corn for an NCGA this year on a farm we just picked up, and the P and K levels were not, there wasn't any of them over 20. So I think it's more about however much you can get into the plant is more important than what's in the soil. And remember, a lot of times, the higher the levels in the soil, the harder it is to get nutrients into the plant. unless you've got really good biology, which I don't know if we have our biology, me and Brooks's picture there, but you can see with our high numbers, P and K levels, we do have a ton of biology in our soil, and I think that's part of the reason why we hold moisture really well. The biology helps. Yeah, so here you go. So mine on here is not a contest field, but it's actually a field where the MACC plot, our field day in the summer, this come out of our MACC plot. It's not a contest field, but it is really good high yielding ground. And this is Brooks, where his contest field was this year. That grew I think he had a 344, but you can see our numbers are significantly higher than what Brooks's are. And Brooks's ground, they grow watermelon, so they use a buttload of dry fertilizer in this watermelon soil. So, like I said, the nutrient levels on his ground is probably as high or not higher than ours, just because of the pounds of dry fertilizer that he throws out for the watermelons. But I think the biology does get hurt by that. Well, I know the biology gets hurt by the amounts of dry fertilizer that he's putting out. So, so to answer your question, I really can't tell you. All I can tell you is what the nutrient levels need to be in the plant, and that's really what the main thing is. We get paid by what's in the plant, but not what's in the soil. So anyway.
Okay, I've got a question from Alan. Can you talk more about tissue sampling from when to start, from when to plant is done, drawing from the seed, and the starts used in the products applied by the planter, and how to determine the timing of eye drops? That's going to take a while.
Several slides on that if we want to get into it after lunch about
that's what I was thinking, that we'll follow that one on into lunch. It is 12:15 or 12:16. If you got any instant questions here, anybody wants to say, I don't want to cut anybody off here before lunch, but if there's any questions, fast questions, you can ask Kevin now.
So you want to do that? Answer that and after lunch?
I guess
okay,
I think just go on to lunch and be about 30 minutes. So it's 12:15. So you guys, if you have to step out or anything, we're going to leave we'll leave the video on or leave it on if anybody wants to talk during the lunchtime here. So
okay,
we'll go on break.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.